Following Generation 4, with Pokemon being over 10 years old by that point, the franchise had evolved quite a bit. For example, it had color now, and that's always too much for any developer to handle, so it decided the series needed a bit of a refresh, allowing for new fans to be able to enter without needing any previous knowledge of the series, and for those old fans who'd been with the franchise for a while to be able to enjoy the game in a way that feels fresh. This meant Generation 5 was officially somewhat of a soft reboot, allowing for faster paced gameplay, a heavier focus on story, and refining the mechanics of previous generations. My name is Renegade, and welcome back to the Pokemon Mainline Retrospective series. Over the last 2 years, I've slowly but surely been doing videos on the mainline titles of every Pokemon generation. Last time, I took a look at Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and to be totally honest, while they definitely are the definitive ways to play Generation 2, I don't think they do enough as remakes to fix the problems surrounding the original Generation 2 that held it back quite a bit. As I've said, today I want to talk about the first set of games within Generation 5, Pokemon Black and White. This video will only focus on those two games. Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 will be given their own separate video in the near future after this one. Of course, if you're new here, I do recommend going back and watching the previous videos, but to give a basic rundown, these videos are usually segmented by which gym I'm heading to. For example, Road to Burgh would cover everything from after Lenora's gym up to the fight with Burgh. There'll also be intermissions that aren't tied to any particular section of the game to cover stuff like the version differences or the region design. That said, let's finally begin covering Pokemon Black and White. So, the opening to this game is pretty straightforward. It's standard Pokemon stuff that I've covered more than enough times. However, what I will say is that I do like just how much faster paced this opening is. Once you're out of the professor's speech, before you can even move, you're forced to pick a Pokemon and thrown into a battle with your two friends, Bianca and Charon. There's no waiting around or forcing you to go looking for the professor, it's straight into it, no bullshit whatsoever, which to be honest I quite like. By this point in the series history, with 5 generations in and the series has been going for nearly 15 years, the opening to the game, as while iconic, is pretty standard and formulaic. There's nothing really to speak on with them, so I'm a big fan of Gen 5 choosing to just kinda get it over with and move you on to the actual meat of the story. Which it does so as soon as it can, because upon arriving to the second town and getting the Pokemon Center tutorial out of the way, you're immediately introduced to Team Plasma, the main villain team for this generation, and I think this is probably the fastest you're introduced to a villain team in the series so far. I guess if you want to count Cyrus in Platinum, you could, but you aren't really properly introduced to him there. In Generation 5, you're fully introduced to Plasma and Ghetsis here, establishing their motivations as wanting to free Pokemon from humanity, which is actually quite an interesting topic for the game to approach. It's also brought on by N, who you are quickly introduced to after the scene with Ghetsis and Plasma. Fast is basically Pokemon Black and White's middle name, next to and. Everything about this game is faster compared to previous generations, and there especially isn't any hand-holding either. I will admit, I did think grinding in this game felt slower compared to grinding in previous generations, but aside from that, everything else here feels significantly faster paced, and I'm personally an enjoyer of that. Speaking of no handholding, let's talk about the first gym. This gym is particularly unique compared to any other gym in the series because unlike with those, the leader you'll face here is fully dependent on which starter you'll pick. If you picked Oshawott, you'll get Silent. If you picked Tepig, you'll get Crest, and if you picked Snivy, you'll get Chili. This gym is a straight up tutorial on type advantages, and to be honest, it was long overdue. It's kinda shocking it took them this long to come up with a gym like this, but it's pretty cool in my opinion, and I wish they did more gyms similar to this one. Since you're obviously at a disadvantage from the moment you walk in, it also increases the difficulty of this gym as well, which meant I was actually struggling with this one due to type matchups. Overall, while it can be difficult, I actually really enjoy this gym. It's a great way to start new players off with type advantages, and it stands out above the rest of the gyms because of this. This section starts out with a segment I'm slightly mixed on. Professor Fennel calls you over to her lab to talk to you about Dream Mist before sending you over to the Dream Yard to get them. Here you encounter Team Plasma, who does their Team Plasma thing, and you foil their plans. This segment is alright, but at least for me, you can't use the Sea-Gear. Does feel a little in the way. One thing I do want to mention about Dream Yard though is that this is the only area in the game where HMs are needed to progress the plot. HMs in this game are heavily toned down, thank god. You no longer need a gym badge to use them, and they're not needed at all outside of Dream Yard, which requires a single use of cut. This generation is what marks the beginning of the end of HMs, with XY also barely needing them, and then Sun and Moon finally removing them completely. And once again, thank god, HMs have done nothing but get in the way. I'm glad to know that I won't have to deal with them for much longer. But yeah, beyond that, I don't have much to say on this segment itself. It does feel a little blown out, but it's kind of cool and a neat introduction to two new Pokemon, Muna and Mushana. While I can't use the Sea-Gear myself, I may as well talk about it. Essentially, the Sea-Gear serves as the game's online functionality. Doesn't really have much importance beyond this though. You can battle, you can trade, you can friend people, etc. Personally, I would have preferred they kept the Poketch, or at least expanded on it to add online capabilities, while keeping the offline stuff as well. The Poketch just felt more useful and far more enjoyable. Now with the online services for Gen 5 being shut down, there's just no real use for the C-Gear anymore, so the bottom screen during normal gameplay goes almost entirely unused until you enter a battle where you need to use the settings. The only real use here is, I guess you can check the time, but like, if that's the only use it has now, what's even the point? I get the idea behind the C-Gear, but it seems like they never accounted for its use in the long term. Moving on though, we're finally allowed to push past Striaton, and Team Plasma strikes immediately again by stealing some kids' Pokemon, and we have to go chase after them. Basic evil team shenanigans. Let's move on and talk about my good buddy Lenora, who took much pride in kicking my ass. I already knew I was in for a rough time. She's a fighting gym leader who has a level 18 and level 20 Pokemon. The thing with level 20 Watchog is I'm not allowed to go past level 20 as my Pokemon will begin to disobey me, so I'm not being given much room to take the advantage, and also she's a fighting type gym leader. By the end of the gym, which somehow I got on my first try, this is what my team looked like. You can see I did have a fighting type, which I got specifically for that gym, and even that died fast to take down. And I would have lost if I didn't carefully pick my move on a single turn. I've had a couple badass beatings from second gym leaders, and even now I still have every reason to fear them. A gym puzzle was kind of fun though. Her gym isn't actually even a full gym. When you enter, you meet her husband, and he tours you around the museum area as Lenora is an archaeologist, which is honestly pretty cool. Her gym puzzle is focused on a Pokemon fan's least favorite thing though, reading. It's a simple puzzle, but I had fun with it. Also, N shows up right before you enter the gym to battle. Not much to say on him yet, though, as obviously they're still kind of building the mystery around him. Immediately after the ass beating from Lenora, guess who strikes again? That's right, Team Plasma. However, this is probably the most interesting segment with them so far, with the exception of their introduction. They steal a dragon skull from the museum, which are then forced to chase them down for with help of Burgh and Lenora. After encountering and defeating a couple different grunts, you finally get the sage back and are introduced to Gorm, one of the 7 sages of Team Plasma alongside Getsis. Personally, I quite like this segment. It's fun and Gorm's introduction feels cool and tense. Then it happened. The most insane location in any of 2D Pokemon in my opinion, potentially Game Freak's biggest showcase of the DS's power, more than Heart Gold, Soul Silver, or Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. That's right, it's Castelia City. Even in the big 2025, where cities in Pokemon are far more commonplace and not really as big of a surprise, hell, the next game to release as of writing this takes place entirely within a city. Entering Castelia City still feels incredible. Never in Pokemon up to this point had we gotten a city that is this big and explorable, and crossing the bridge over it for the first time is an unforgettable experience. I think this is the biggest case of Game Freak growing with the DS hardware. You already got a lot of cool shots here and there in Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, and Heart Gold, Soul Silver, but you can tell this is where they really got the most out of it. And when I got here, my first thought was to go challenge the gym, but you won't believe who else showed up once again. That's right, none other than Team Plasma. Now this isn't a bad thing, actually dare I say a congratulations is in order, because I haven't even got the 3rd badge yet, and you've already got more screen time than Team Galactic did in all of Diamond and Pearl. Now, jokes aside, I do think this is actually a good thing. Sure, it can get a little annoying constantly seeing them pop up every 5 seconds, but it's a good way to keep them feeling like an active threat to the player and like the story is constantly moving. And this is effective too, because unlike Team Galactic, I actually care about Team Plasma. It feels like they're a genuine villain team, a roadblock that you have to constantly be looking out for, as they could be around the corner and you'd never know. We also get an appearance from Iris here, and similar to what I've been saying in every one of these videos now, I always love when the gym leaders are actively involved in the story, beyond just serving as obstacles for the player to pass. I'm glad that over time, gym leaders have become a more active part of the game's plot. These gym leaders, just like any other character, are meant to be real people who live and breathe in this world, so to have them acknowledge and be more involved in the game's story really makes that feel more believable. That being said, Burgh's gym puzzle is pretty simple. You walk through these honey walls and step on the switch to make it to Burgh. That's it. The fight I had more trouble with. Now this one could be debated that it's because I suck at the game, but I did think it still felt difficult. Now usually with Pokemon games, the first 2 or 3 gym leaders end up being a bit difficult and the rest are total cakewalk. And now that we've reached that threshold, I'm genuinely curious to see if that continues to hold up, or if they'll actually pull their weight. Before we continue on though, as I was speaking about Castelia earlier, let's talk about region design.
It's a first step into Unova, a region like no other. a place where the seasons change, and there's a new adventure at every turn. You can discover over 150 never-before-seen Pokemon as you explore the all-new Unova region. Start from a new beginning. Pokemon Black version and Pokemon White version only for Nintendo DS systems. Rated E for everyone.
Like I stated at the start, Pokemon Black and White were intended to be refreshes of the franchise, games that anyone could pick up and play no matter how familiar you were with the previous entries. This design philosophy shows itself in many different ways, via the gameplay, the story, what have you, but particularly, it also shows up in the design of the region itself. Generations 1 to 4 were based on regions of Japan. Kanto was based on Kanto, Johto was based on Kansai, Hoenn was based on Kyushu, and Sinnoh was based on Hokkaido. But with Generation 5, they did something a little bit different, because Unova, Generation 5's region, is based on the United States, specifically New York City, this being most obvious with how Castelia City is presented. Unova is a very beautiful looking region, and it stands out more with its towns and cities being the largest up to this point, not just in size but in terms of detail and the amount of things to do in them. Caves are still my greatest nightmare here, but there are some genuinely good looking caves here too, particularly the most important one that I'm sure everyone is waiting for me to talk about, Chargestone Cave. Probably the most beautiful looking cave in 2D Pokemon, if not then one of the most. But I'll talk about that later on because it obviously has story importance. Point is it's very pretty. I will say though, the routes can feel kinda short at times, and there's not really one I particularly care for too much. They look nice, but they aren't crazy expensive or anything. The cities and towns are the real focal points here, with the routes just being paths to get you there, unlike prior where the routes were usually a lot bigger with more to do beyond fighting and catching. Though, personally, despite all I've been saying, I do think Hoenn, Sinnoh, and Johto, specifically Heart Gold, Soul Silver Johto, are better, but I do prefer Unova over Kanto. There are 2 rival battles following the gym battle with Burgh. I'm not going to talk about the rivals just yet, but I will get to them very soon because there are important parts coming up that talking about them here would be unnecessary. I do want to add though that whoever thought it'd be okay to add them back to back with no warning about Charon's battle is a sick and twisted individual. Going past the desert that will definitely not be important in any substantial capacity later, we make it to Ambassador City, which starts off with basic Team Plasma shenanigans that aren't really worth talking about. There is a second shenanigan that is worth talking about, and I'm sure you know what it is if you've played this particular Nintendo DS video game, but I will get to it after I do the more important discussion of Bianca and everything there is to do in this city. In particular, the one thing I mainly did while I was here was the musical theater, and this is where I realized this is possibly the greatest Pokemon game to ever exist, because oh my god, this is truly theater at its finest. I have no complaints. There is nothing that could be done to improve this. I shed a genuine tear watching as Duart's sprite inverted over and over again. Truly impeccable gameplay. There's also of course the battle subway, but I can't lie, I never did this, I don't feel like doing it, but it seems pretty cool if you're heavily into battling. I've been working on the script for far too long, I need a break. Going back to the musical, after leaving it for the first time, you run into, thankfully, not Team Plasma, but instead Bianca, who is in the midst of arguing with her dad as he wants her to go home, but she wants to continue traveling Unova. This is something I particularly like with both Bianca and Charon, who I'll speak on later, but his scene doesn't show up until after you beat Elesa and leave Nimbasa. Both of these two start out as your ordinary rivals, characters that support you but will occasionally show up throw down as well. Then, over the course of the game, they begin to become more than that. They slowly realize that they don't purely exist to become trainers. We've had rivals that grow over the course of the game, this isn't a new thing. Our first 2 rivals, Blue and Silver, although much less with Blue, were exactly that. But these 2 are different, particularly because they don't want you dead, but also because they're just more interesting to me. One could say, they're not as black or white. Especially in this little argument Bianca and her dad have, with her dad possessing a very simple mindset of, these people do their thing, we do our thing. When realistically, people are a lot more complex than that, and can't just conform to one singular line of thinking. Ties in very well with one of the heaviest themes of Black and White, that, ironically, humanity isn't that. It never has been that simple, although I'm sure some may wish it was. Instead it falls into a grey middle area. Now we'll have plenty more to talk about with the rivals later on, but a bunch of N fans unfortunately stormed my house, so now I have to talk about one of his most iconic scenes. Yeah, let's discuss the Ferris wheel. When heading towards the gym, N does his thing of surprising the player out of nowhere and takes you on a Ferris wheel ride. Now, this is very nice of N, but I wonder what he wants to talk about. What could have possibly inspired this heartfelt action from him? Oh. Oh, okay, N. It is funny how beloved this scene is, considering the Ferris wheel part lasts about 10 seconds. It's very cool, but still shorter than I expected it to be. They just kind of go on there so N can reveal his special twist that everyone saw coming. I don't know, maybe N thought it'd be cooler that way and wanted to aura farm. But yeah, jokes aside, I mean, this scene is cool, I guess. I don't have much to say on it. It's a decent way to set up N as the goal the player's aiming to reach, and N being one of the people to encourage you to take on the rest of the gyms is pretty smart and kind of fun, because the way his dialogue is worded alongside how his portrait looks, it makes you feel as if he's starting to feel joy out of the relationship you and him have slowly fostered. Anyways, now that I've angered every N fangirl in a 5-mile vicinity, let's talk about Lisa. Gym puzzle, not very interesting, looks cool though. Elisa's fight on the other hand was pretty fun. It did take me 2 attempts, which was my own fault, but I had fun with the fight regardless. Post Elesa opens up with your standard rival battle. I don't need to speak on this, but what I do want to speak on is what happens after, because soon after we defeat Charon, we're quickly introduced to the champion of this region, Alda, who isn't much of a champion. Yeah, Alda's a little bit of a fraud, but I still love him, particularly because of what he does for Charon's arc. Alda is the first person to challenge the idea of becoming champion, of becoming the strongest, because once you're considered the strongest, what's the point? What's the goal beyond that? We've had plenty of interesting champions by this point, but none have really challenged the status quo of what it means to become champion and the pursuit of strength like Alda does here. Alda might not be a perfect champion, but he really does have a lot more depth to him than any other one so far. And you could even argue that today. We cross the bridge and then make it Drift Fail City, or as I like to call it, oh, this is where this song comes from, City. More Team Plasma shenanigans go by. This section was fun, I guess. I do wish they just let you challenge all of the grunts in this container at once, instead of making you go through all of them individually, because they introduced triple battles in this game, but they are barely present, so this would have been a good use for them. But yeah, okay, whatever. Team Plasma do make one more appearance in this city right as you try to enter the gym, where Getsis comes and saves the group rearrested from Clay. It is a short scene, but I do want to touch on how it, again, presents Plasma as more of a threat, and how they were instantly able to make Clay, one of the stronger gym leaders, instantly surrender due to their sheer numbers. It's also by this point where you could probably begin to question the true nature between the 7 sages. Getsis is in the 7 sages, but he's far more active than the rest of them are, and the game generally presents him as just being more important than any other member of Team Plasma aside from N. It's kinda subtle, but also really obvious in hindsight how they were clearly building towards the big twist at the end of the game. Clay's gym is digging. You just go down an elevator and make it to the bottom, where Clay is harvesting tons of kryptonite, because bro thinks he's Lex Luthor or something. This is probably the easiest gym so far in terms of fight, but honestly, I have no right to complain. I liked this. Sometimes I don't enjoy always getting my ass kicked. I want to do the ass kicking for once. Alright, fine, let's speak about Chargestone Cave. Chargestone Cave is, in my opinion, the best and most memorable cave in the game, and also the most important due to... Let me give you 20 seconds to guess what aspect of the game could possibly make this important. Hey, so while we wait, why don't you subscribe? I mean, it's free. You get cool stuff. I do videos on a bunch of different topics and a bunch of that. Like if you enjoy this video so far. I don't know. My time is coming up. Oh shit. Yeah, please just subscribe and like. I really need it. Please, 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 please. If you guessed Team Plasma and N, you'd be right, because N is the focus of this section. It's kind of ironic that I also just spoke about the whole Getsis thing, because again, N's dialogue here alludes to Getsis' twist. Getsis wants to see what kind of trainer you are. Getsis enlists Team Triad. N tells Getsis about us. There's a lot that alludes to what's actually going on and who is truly in control here, but, you know, we'll get to that later. Like I said in the region design section, this cave is very pretty with a cool gimmick as well. It's technically just the strength puzzles from the previous games, but honestly, the fact that you don't need a HM to do it makes this one 1,000 times better. Throughout the cave, you're basically searching for N, and after 15 minutes of doing nothing but fighting Team Plasma Grunts, you finally make it to him. This conversation and battle with N reveals more about his motivations and goals, but something I do feel the necessity to point out is that it also portrays N as genuinely caring for Pokemon. He's not doing it for a selfish goal or something that would benefit him and only him, but he's genuinely set on supporting the Pokemon. It's something that helps N to stand out from not just Team Plasma, but from the other opposing teams as well. This can also be seen in his lineup of Pokemon in each battle you have with him. N has 5 battles within Black and White, and every single time his lineup is completely different. The only time a Pokemon of his appears more than once is technically Clink, although the second time it appears, it's in its evolved form, Klinklank. But why this is noteworthy is because his team is based on the location that you fight him in. For example, with Chargestone Cave, N has a Boldore, Ferroseed, Joltik, and Klink as his team, all Pokemon that appear in Chargestone Cave. In the fight prior to this, in Nimbasa City, N's team consists of Sandile, Scraggy, Darumaka, and Sigilif. Sandile, Scraggy, and Darumaka can all be caught in Route 4, while Sigilif is a little off to the side in Desert Resort. And so forth with the rest of N's battles, and is literally calling on the Pokemon of that route to assist him. It's an awesome but subtle way to show off his love for Pokemon via battle, and also keeps his team feeling fresh and different every time, especially when for a first time player, you'll never be able to anticipate what he might have. Previous teams never really had a distinct Pokemon or used them for any other reason than to do their bidding, but with N, you can truly feel a connection here, even compared to Team Plasma, where there are a lot more of the generic villain team stereotype you'd come to expect from Pokemon. N has a much more genuine passion for Pokemon and fully means it when he says that he wants to free them from humanity. I also think it's cool how he calls out Professor Juniper here with the Pokedex, how he puts the thought into your mind that maybe we don't understand Pokemon as much as we think we do by putting them into made-up classes and such like that. After Chargestone, we pull through to the next cave and get the Pokedex upgraded alongside meeting Skyla. But before being allowed to take on her gym though, we have to go do this tower section, and yeah, this section is certainly a section. After some honestly pretty grueling battles, we make it to the top of the tower and speak to Skyla, and while this does offer some nice characterization for her, this scene feels a little pointless, because the main purpose is basically to tell you that you're a nice person. It's a very brave scene, and again, it's particularly good for Skyla, but it doesn't serve any real purpose, and honestly made me feel a little disappointed. What didn't disappoint me though is Skyla's gym, potentially my favorite gym in the game, if not top 3. Although simple in its puzzle, it's really fun to get shot out of a cannon. Definitely not safe for a kid though, or anyone actually, considering there are no mattresses here. You are getting a shot out of a cannon and landing on cold hard ground. That can't be safe. Whoever the safety inspector was for this gym needs to be fired. Battle though was surprisingly easy, to a point where I took 0 damage during the entire battle, but honestly I'm not complaining at all. I'm truly relieved that it was this easy, considering the game up to this point has been beating my ass like it's a 9-to-5 job. Following Skyla's gym battle, we exit the gym, and rears his head again, and Zebstrika doxes me. Guess what Pokemon's getting released into the wild later? N mentions that Getsis is going to find stones that can summon the legendary dragon Pokemon that N is going to befriend, so he can rule and release all Pokemon into the wild, and then he kind of just leaves, which, yeah, they tend to do that sometimes. Charon also shows up for rival battle number 3485, and Aldous also appears to lecture Charon more, but it's kind of just more of what I've already talked about. Twist Mountain is pretty cool to explore. There's a vending machine here with infinite heals for very cheap, so I took advantage of that. Design-wise, it's more of your standard cave, but I really like how the layout works here to make you spiral downwards. At the end of Twist Mountain, you run into Charon again, but this time is in the midst of confronting a Team Plasma member. He chooses to stay behind after this though, so he can think about what Alda asked of him. There are hints towards Dragon Spiral Tower before we're directly told about it, but I'm not going to focus on those yet because we're not doing that yet. First, it's Brycen's gym. Brycen's gym challenge is really just your standard ice puzzle. It's kind of funny that every generation after Gen 1 has included this in at least one gym. That included Gen 3, which, despite not having an ice gym leader, still had an ice-themed puzzle, which was the same as these ones. I guess it's just the easiest puzzle for them to do, because, like, what else can you really do with ice beyond this? I guess you could have a move which makes new structures that the player could cross, but that would, one, mean having to make it an out gem, and require the player to use it on at least one Pokemon, which Game Freak was clearly trying to phase out at this point, and 2, just be more complex on a technical level compared to just having the chicken cross the road. Brycen's fight is decently difficult, I had my struggles with it, but thankfully got the badge and was able to move on. Alright, let's not waste any time because now we can talk about the fun stuff. Leaving the gym, Bianca and Charon jump the player, with Charon in particular having a realization of how he's developed as a person since the start of the game, questioning if he's the one who's truly become stronger, or if his Pokemon are the ones that have done that. But of course, now it's time for one of my favourite, and honestly one of the most memorable segments, Dragon Spiral Tower. Both in terms of aesthetic and design, this segment of the game looks incredible. In any other generation, this probably would have been a final boss area. Hell, I thought this was the final boss area, the conclusion to the story, but it wasn't. But this is in fact where shit goes down. There are tons of Team Plasma members hoarding the place, and I mean it. Like, they really make you feel completely overwhelmed and outnumbered here, which helps to set the tone of how dire the situation has become more. But then, finally, you make it to the top of the tower, and can I just say, I love the way cutscenes are done in this game. Particularly when it comes to how the characters look within them. It feels like it was ripped straight from a storybook, which is honestly quite in line with Black and White's whole aesthetic. And getting the legendary Pokemon here is probably my favourite story decision this game has made, because up to this point, no other generation has given the evil team this much leverage. While Team Galactic and Aqua Magma have obviously been successful in summoning the lane legendaries, they've never been able to actually get a hold of them because, well, they're the bad guys, they're not meant to win. By giving N, the villain of the game, one of the legendaries, it truly makes you and even the characters question if you're actually in the right or not. Maybe N is right. Maybe this entire time you've been on the wrong side. Who is the true hero in this story? N is a genuine threat to the narrative and the people who reside within it now, solely because of him gaining the power of one of the legendary Pokemon. And with that out of the way, we're told to go look for the Dark Stone, and with that, we go from one of my favorite segments in the game to one of my least favorites. I don't like Relic Castle, which is ironic considering one of my main usernames has Relic in it, but yeah, I don't like this segment very much. It's long, it's boring, and worst of all, it's completely pointless because it turns out you never even needed to go here, because the Dark Stone isn't in Relic Castle. Lenora had it the entire time within her museum. There is this admittedly pretty cool interaction between Ghetsis and Aldar, but I feel like you could have placed this literally anywhere else in the game. Relic Castle really just feels like padding, having little reason to exist other than to extend the runtime a little further. Regardless, we go back to Lenora's gym, we get given the Dark Stone, and begin to head towards Opelucid City. On our way there, we run back into Bianca, who has these lines about what she truly wants to do in life. Similar to how Charon reflected on his development after Brycen's gym, Bianca does the same thing, reflecting on her development and everything that's happened to her so far, allowing to reach closer to her true motive that she really wants to learn more about Pokemon outside of battling, similar to that of a professor. I once again need to reiterate how much I love that these rivals choose to deviate from their regular roles in the story. They aren't just obstacles made to get in the way of the player, they are genuine characters whose battles reflect this. Charon's battles tend to usually be more difficult than Bianca's because Charon is much more battle experienced, whereas Bianca's heart doesn't reside battling, which is the truth she comes to accept over the course of the game. Bianca can't become a champion, a strong trainer like she wishes to do. It's not the path she's meant to follow, it's not her ideal, but it is the truth for her, and she comes to accept that slowly but surely. Heading into the bridge, Ghetsis shows up once again to confront us before we make it to Opelucid City. Not much to say here, he really just gives us basic threats like you'd usually expect from a villain team. We're not done with Ghetsis yet though, because once we make it into Opelucid, we get to bear witness to just how much effect Team Plasma is having on the world, paralleling their speech at the beginning of the game. This time, public opinion is beginning to sway in Plasma's favour, showing how much reach they've gained and how big of a threat they've become. While there are some who still refuse, the rest of the crowd seems a lot more convinced that maybe releasing Pokemon is the right thing to do. If this is what Plasma could do with one legendary, imagine what they could do with two. Soon after that, we meet up with Iris and Drayden. Olive heads back to the Pokemon League, and it's finally time for the final gym. And in classic Black and White fashion, this gym kicked my ass. The footage for this gym is contained in a 40-minute recording. 37 out of 40 of those minutes are me going through that gym. I don't think I've ever spent that long in a single gym. This is in part due to its puzzle and its typing. The puzzle itself is pretty simple on its own. You stand on the two arms of the dragon in order to change the positioning of its head. so you can make your way up to the gym leader, but combined with 8 trainers, all of which are dragon type trainers, so already pretty difficult, it can make this gym take a good while, especially when the only type it's weak to is ice until fairy comes along in Generation 6, but you know, we haven't reached there yet. Thankfully though, Iris herself wasn't too difficult, particularly because I spammed Fly and also because foul play is kind of busted when used correctly. But with that, that's all 8 gym badges collected and we can finally move on to the Pokemon League and Victory Road. After this intermission, because now I can finally speak on version differences.
It's a new world filled with over 150 never-before-seen Pokemon. You can assemble your ultimate Pokemon team and set out for adventure in the Unova region. Take on Team Plasma and uncover the secret of the legendary Pokemon. Start from a new beginning. Pokemon Black version and Pokemon White version only for Nintendo DS systems. Rated E for everyone. You can catch Victini, the first Psychic and Fire-type Pokemon, only until April 10th.
Just like every Pokemon game with multiple versions, Black and White have a couple differences depending on which one you play. Let's start off with the most obvious one being the Pokemon you can obtain depending on which you pick. In Pokemon Black, you get Weedle, Kakuna, Beedrill, Murkrow, Honchkrow, Houndour, Houndoom, Shroomish, Breloom, Plusle, Gothita, Gothorita, Gothitelle, Vullaby, Mandibuzz, Tornadus, and Reshiram. In Pokemon White, you get Caterpie, Metapod, Butterfree, Paras, Parasect, Misdreavus, Mismagius, Poochyena, Mightyena, Minun, Solosis, Duosion, and Rionculus, Ruffiat, Braviary, Thundurus, and Zekrom, but that's not all for White, because you also get access to all of these that I'll show on screen now because of another version exclusive feature. Black City and White Forest are locations exclusive to the version you pick. Black City is more focused on battling, whereas White Forest is a focus on catching Pokemon. Now, what's crazy about both of these is that in order to get them, you have to beat the game. But if you don't do it within 4 days, the NPCs that reside there will begin to leave. If you take longer than 16 days, no residents will show up, and this applies to both locations. And honestly, this kinda sucks. First of all, how are you supposed to know this? Locking these NPCs to a time limit is really odd. It's obviously not a big deal, but I really don't get why this was a choice they made. And even when you do get to this area, that time limit still remains into effect. So if you don't log on to your game every 4 days, these NPCs will start to dip for no real reason. The only way to bring them back is by having someone with a copy of the opposite version invite you to Black City/White Forest via the Entro link, which nowadays is incredibly difficult unless you yourself choose to play through the game on the opposite version just to get more NPCs, which isn't really worth it. Differences also appear in the designs for certain cities, particularly Opelucid and Striaton have different aesthetics depending on your version. In Black, they have a far more modernized look, whereas in White, they're far more rural. Also, while not technically exclusive, as you can encounter at least one trainer with the opposite mechanic in both games, depending on the game you play, either rotation battles or triple battles will be given a focus. In Black, you'll see more rotation battles, whereas in White, the NPCs with rotation battles will instead do triple battles. Triple battles are, as the name suggests, similar to double or single battles, but instead there's 3 Pokemon on the field. Rotation battles are far more interesting because while there are 3 Pokemon on the field, only 1 Pokemon can attack at a time depending on which one is in the primary position, which I personally think allows for far more strategy. And finally, while normally I'd have version differences placed around the start of the video, I decided to place it here because of the last gym. In Black, instead of facing Iris as the last gym leader, you'll instead face Drayden. In White, like I said, you'll fight Iris. Their teams are mostly the same, aside from differences in their abilities and their genders, but beyond that, it's pretty much the same fight. Alright, version differences finally done, let's end the game. Victory Road and the Pokemon League as a whole is a bit different this time round. By this point in previous gens, the villain's story would be over, and your main goal is purely to become champion. But from the start, Black and White have sought to define themselves from the rest of the games, putting twists on the classic tropes that have been present since the start of the series. And that doesn't change here. The Elite Four and Victory Road are more off to the side, as your sole focus is a quest to find and defeat N. Despite that though, we still need to cover them. There's an important scene that happens right before you enter Victory Road where you, alongside Sharon and Bianca, once again discuss the journey so far, and it pretty much sums up the themes of the game. Humans are complex. You think you want to do one thing, but then something else comes along and you want to do that instead. People grow and change as they experience more of the world around them, and they come to confront what they can do instead of what they think they should do. Truth and ideals is this game's entire premise. Identity, goals, ambitions, hopes and dreams, opinions, it can all change as much as you desire. Humans are not one-note static characters, they're malleable. They can change and adjust depending on the needs and wants of a single person or their environments. It's an interesting thing to tackle that I really believe Black and White does well at. You'd never expect this from Pokemon, but here we are. Going through the badge gates, I do honestly like how they brought it back to the way Gen 1 did it, where you go through an area themed around each badge. I always thought that was a really cool way to build up to Victory Road, and I'm glad to see it get implemented again here. Victory Road itself is designed pretty differently from the usual way, this time being you have to climb up a hill instead of a regular cave, and it can be a bit confusing to get through. I honestly like this way more, it just has a lot more personality to it than any other previous iteration of Victory Road. And with that, we've made it to the Pokemon League. First of all, although not intentional, I do highly recommend doing this at night. Personally, it sets the mood way better. You can do it anytime and it really doesn't matter, but I think doing it at night just has a way better vibe to it. The Pokemon League is a little different to how they've been in previous regions. First of all, you can do them in any order. Doesn't matter which, it is entirely up to you who you choose to fight first and last. Because of them being in any order though, it means all of their levels are the same, compared to before where the levels would get higher and higher the further you went. Still not as weak as Johto's Elite Four somehow, but still pretty weak in comparison to every other Elite Four. I will give the Univers Elite Four this though, they do have the best looking rooms by far. The Elite Four's rooms in Univers are very cool and definitely shows how far we've come from the bland ass rooms of Kanto. I'll be going in the order that I chose to do them, which was Shauntal, Marshall, Grimsley, and then Caitlyn. Starting off with Shauntal, she went down pretty easily. I didn't really have too much trouble with her, thankfully, which, with her being a ghost-type trainer, I really did think I would have problems, but luckily I didn't. Marshall, on the other hand, was a big problem. By the end of the fight, over half my team was knocked out. Something with this Elite Four that can cause problems is that the type matchups are very slim, with each of their Pokemon not really having much diversity in what you can do to take them on. And this could not be clearer with Marshall, all fighting types, which means the only chance you have is with Flying or Psychic, and if you don't have a good Pokemon for either of those, you're in for a pretty rough time. Grimsley was fine, his main problem child was his Bishop, but I got through it with Earthquake, and the rest of his team wasn't too much of an issue. Caitlyn was also the same way, I didn't really have too much of a struggle with her. With the Elite Four down and out, it's finally time to take on the champion. Sorry, it's time to take on this little green guy. Yeah, so in one of the coolest twists this game has ever done, the finale to the Pokemon League is not the champion, it's N and Team Plasma. As you walk into the Hall of the Champion, it's revealed N has bested Alder in a battle. And not only that, but this entire time, N's castle has been under the Pokemon League. Getting to see it rise up from the ground was genuinely so cool. As we enter the castle, we're confronted by the 7 stages, minus Getsis, which I'm sure isn't foreshadowing anything whatsoever, and was saved by none other than the gym leaders that we fought throughout the journey, with the exception of the Striaton City brothers for some reason, but Silent is a main character in the anime, so he gets his time to shine anyways. This is a genius way to have the bonds you've created and the people you've met throughout your journey matter in a meaningful way. Having the gym leaders all band together to defend you so you can take on the final boss is awesome and makes it feel like everything you went through genuinely matters to the region. N's Castle is one of the sickest locations in all of Pokemon. Design-wise it's obviously great, but also just has a ton of lore drops and things to check out. It's such a good final location, and the final battle is probably my favorite Pokemon finale ever. Once you enter N's throne room, there's no breaks, no nothing. It is pure full speed ahead from the second you enter, and it is bliss. The legendaries appearing are so cool, even if it kind of broke my my legal Nintendo DS. And with that, upon obtaining the help of Zekrom, the final battle against N begins, and wow, this put me through the fucking ringer. There were genuinely tough moments during this fight that had me worried I would actually lose, but the aftermath of this is totally worth it. There's a quote that I want to focus on here from N that I think is important to drive home what N truly gains from this journey. It's not by rejecting different ideas, but by accepting them that the world creates a chemical reaction. That is the true formula for changing the world. By the end of Black and White, the world doesn't change. Plasma and N are defeated, but the world continues on as it was. And I think this is something intentional by design, because neither the protagonist nor N grow until the very end of the game in N's case. Changing the world isn't something that can just happen, it takes time and tons of people for it to occur. One person cannot change the world, especially when that person is unable to accept the different ideas of those around them. But of course, if you know Black and White, you know the fight doesn't end here, with Ghetsis immediately showing up to revealing himself as the true mastermind behind it all, the true final boss. Ghetsis is your more typical Pokemon villain, someone who does not care for anyone but himself, a person who cannot grow or change. Someone who's trapped in their own ideals, who cannot face the truth of reality. And because of that, he goes down in a difficult fight, but it means that this game is finally over. So obviously Pokemon Black and White has a pretty expansive post-game that I could spend another 10, 20, maybe even 30 minutes going over, but there wouldn't be much point to it beyond repeating the same things I've already said over and over again. There is a lot here though. The game really has so much to do when you're done with the already massive main story. It's arguably the largest Pokemon game in terms of pure content, but again, I don't want to cover all that because I don't think I need to. Like I said at the very beginning of this insanely long video, Pokemon Black and White was intended as a refresh for the Pokemon franchise, to a point where there are 0 returning characters or returning Pokemon until you get to the post-game. And did it succeed at this? Dude, absolutely. Pokemon Black and White is undoubtedly my favorite of the 2D Pokemon entries in terms of gameplay. The battles are faster, the world looks beautiful, the locations are some of the best in the series, pushing the DS's hardware as far as it can go. The difficulty is way more consistent, and the game really likes to make you think about your next move. Once again, there is so much to do and to see here all across the universe. Story-wise, it's not even an argument that this is the most thematically rich game. Team Plasma actually gets screen time. They're involved in all of the story from beginning to end. N is such an incredible antagonist, constantly being built up and taunting you throughout your journey, until finally you're both able to see eye to eye. N embodies the game's themes of truth and ideals, striving to make his ideals a reality until you, the player, make him confront his truth. That he's not the hero, that he cannot change the world by himself alone, that it must be done by interacting with others and coming to accept their realities as well as your own. Bianca and Charon are probably my favorite rivals, both once again embodying the themes. Bianca embodies truth, confronting that she's not cut out to be a trainer, but she does learn that she can become someone who can study and learn more about the Pokemon that inhabit the world, and Charon embodies someone who strives for his ideals but needs to realize what the truth of that ideal is. Why is it that he seeks to become stronger? When he has become the strongest, where will he go from there? Well, I didn't speak about it as much as I usually do. The soundtrack in this game is a banger, but honestly, that's to be expected from Pokemon. They've never disappointed on soundtracks, and there was no way they were going to stop here. Whether it be the faster-paced opening, the stronger emphasis on its themes, or the twists that it pulls on classic Pokemon tropes, Pokemon Black and White wants you to know that it is not an ordinary Pokemon game. Neither in its gameplay or story, this is a fresh new take on a game series that many feared had begun to become stagnant. Pokemon Black and White might not be perfect, but I'd be lying if I said they weren't my favorite of the 2D Pokemon entries. Regarding the tier list, do I even need to say it? S tier. The next episode of the series will be covering Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, the sequels to the Generation 5 games, and most importantly, the grand finale to 2D Pokemon and the DS era. Until then, thank you all for watching, I'll see you all next time.